Let's look at some tools for developing place value understanding. As you work to help K2 students create an understanding of place value concepts, you want to always begin with proportional models and then move to non-proportional models. So let's take a moment to talk about what that means, proportional versus non-proportional. So proportional models are models that the 10 is actually 10 times bigger than the 1. In other words, it's proportional. So let's think about these snap cubes that we've used in class. So if you think about just one snap cube, and then think about a 10. The 10 is actually 10 times bigger than the 1. So we call that proportional, okay? Let's also look at this model, these bean sticks. Basically, those are just beans that are glued on a stick. And so you'll notice that when you're looking at one bean versus a stick of 10 beans, that the 10 is really 10 times larger than the 1. So those are proportional models. We want to start with proportional models with kids, and then we move to non-proportional models, okay? Let me give you a quick example. If you look at these place value chips that are used with the Singapore math curriculum, if you notice, the 1000 has the exact same size as the 1. Those are not proportional because the 1000, if it was proportional, would be huge, huge disc. So this is a non-proportional model, and we want to use this later with children. So we're going to go back to proportional models and start from the very, very beginning. When students first learn about place value, they need to be working with groupable base 10 blocks, okay? Groupable means that kids actually can create those groups themselves, all right? So they spend most of first grade working with those groupable base 10 models. After lots of experience with grouping them themselves, kids will come to a point that they don't need to group them themselves anymore. Then they're ready to move to pre-grouped or trading models, okay? These models are already grouped. For example, these bean sticks. Notice those beans are already glued down for kids. So those are a pre-grouped or trading model. Also, base 10 blocks are a pre-grouped or trading model. If you think about it, once you get 10 ones, you actually have to trade those 10 ones in for a 10. That's why we call it a trading model. Now, one of the mistakes that I see lots of elementary teachers making is when they start their place value unit, they go straight for these base 10 blocks. And the thing is, these base 10 blocks don't always make a lot of sense to very young children, like in kindergarten first and even early second grade. That's because these models, we try to convince children that this 10, this stick here, is worth 10. And that doesn't really make sense to the mind of a 5-year-old, because when they think about that, if they're going to count that stick, imagine a kid grabbing it and picking it up, that's just one stick, right? And if you look at it, it looks like a big 1. It just goes straight up and down. So we as teachers are trying to say that's a 10. All right, so do you see how that model doesn't make the best sense to kids? That's why we always want to start with these groupable base 10 models. After lots of experience with groupable base 10, we move to pre-grouped. And after lots of experience with pre-grouped, we can move to these non-proportional models. Let's talk a little bit more about these groupable base 10 models. These are the ones that we use in kindergarten and lots in first grade that help kids really understand that whole bundle of 10 or our place value system. When you get 10, it goes to the next place. So one of the most common models are these snap cubes, and we've used these in class before and you've seen them used in videos. And basically when kids get a tower of 10, then they go back to using singles again. But kids are actually making those towers of 10. They're doing the grouping. Likewise, when you're using these straws, same thing. Once you get 10 single straws, then you put a rubber band around it and makes a group of 10. All right? Another groupable base 10 model is when you use something like chips in a cup. So in this method, every time they get 10 little chips, they put a group of 10 in a cup, okay? So it's just a way of kind of keeping track of their groupable base 10 models. Another model that's actually groupable is using a 10 frame. So maybe if I gave kids this frame and I said, show me 14, how many 10s and how many 1s are in 14? they would actually put out chips into each one of these frames and then have 4 extras, all right? So because kids are actually putting the chip on that frame, it's called a groupable base 10 model, all right? Something that's really important to notice is a specific tool doesn't necessarily determine if it's groupable or pre-grouped, all right? I just told you that this 10 frame could be used as a groupable base 10 model if children are actually putting out those chips and making the groups of 10 themselves. But if you showed to students the 10 frame like this that are already filled out, that is actually a pre-grouped model, all right? So groupable models mean children are actually making the groups, and we use those in kindergarten and in first grade. So when do you transition to pre-grouped models? As kids become more comfortable with the pre-grouped objects, then they actually just start to leave them in groups of 10. So if you're saying like build the number 23 for me, eventually they're going to stop going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10 and making that group of 10. And they're going to just say, can I just use this tower that's already 10? I know it's 10. So once they say, I know this is 10, let me just use 2 of these, that tells you they're ready to use pre-grouped models. So some common pre-group models that we use are the 10 frame that's already filled out. We've already talked about that. These bean sticks. So bean sticks are another one of the tools that it's according to how you use them. The day that you make bean sticks, the day that you actually take those tongue depressors and glue 10 beans on them, they're actually groupable. Just that one day when kids are actually gluing those beans down, they're groupable. But every day afterwards where kids are actually using those pre-glued bean sticks, then those become pre-grouped models, all right? These are also called trading models. And I want you to think about that with these base 10 blocks here. So I'm sure that you have had experience with working with base 10 blocks like the ones here to my right. And you know that once you get 10 ones, you have to trade it for a 10 rod. That's why it's called a trading model, because when I get those 10 ones, I have to trade it for another 10. And once I get 10 tens, I trade those in for a 100, okay? So these are called pre-grouped or trading models. These models are used very much in second grade and in third grade. It's where I see these models used the most. After kids have had lots of experience with pre-grouped or trading models, then we can move over to non-proportional models, all right? Remember, these are the models that are no longer in proportions. So a common error that teachers often make is using coins as a place value model. And when you think about it, it's like, oh, well, that makes sense. A dime is 10 and a penny is 1, right? However, think about it. Which coin is the smallest, a penny or a dime? Right, the dime is smaller, but the dime represents 10, all right? So that's non-proportional, and that can really play with the brains of little people, all right? So that's why we hold off on those non-proportional models, because they don't always make the most sense to little children. So for example, those coins, yeah, let's not use those for place value in first grade, because they don't really get that. How can that dime be worth 10, but it's actually smaller than the penny that's worth 1? So that's a common non-proportional model. Another non-proportional model are these place value discs that are used in Singapore math. And you'll notice that all the discs are the same size. And these are little like chewy discs, I call them. They're the little styrofoamy discs. Another non-proportional model is an abacus. Because each of those rungs represents a place value. And so like the reds might represent tens, and then those whites might represent hundreds. This last picture here is a non-proportional model. These are called arrow cards. And they're really good for helping kids work with expanded form. If you think about putting on top of each other, placing that 60 on top of the 300 and then the 4 on top of the 60, you can see that that makes 364. Really awesome place value model, but definitely non-proportional. So just to bring it all together, when you're starting with first graders, you want to use groupable proportional models, okay? You want the kids to actually make those groups. We call that unitizing. It's when they are being able to start counting by groups. Next, we want kids to move in second grade into those pre-grouped models, like those bean sticks and the bean sticks and the base 10 blocks, all right? Now, one of the other reasons that we wait here and move to proportional models is we're moving to the hundreds place in second grade. And so imagine using those groupable models and having to actually make a group of 100. That becomes really tedious. So as the numbers get a little larger, now we move to a pre-grouped model that's easier to build those numbers, okay? Finally, in third grade, we might move to these non-proportional models. And these work really well, like as we move into the thousands place. Notice how I can then add in those place value discs, and that's a really quick way then to represent 1,000. Imagine building a number like 2,432 with base 10 blocks, and how cumbersome that would be. But when the numbers get bigger, I can move to these place value discs, which don't take up as much space. So I hope this video has helped you better understand the models that we can use for helping students develop an understanding of place value.